Hello, bonjour. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are excited to welcome you to this career event, Symposium on Justice. And this is led by the Career and Learning Development Department at Royal Roads University. My name is Nancy Prévost-Maurice, and I am joined today by my colleagues Heather and Tanya, and many other folks in the chat, in the room. Thank you so much. And this session is being recorded on November 5th, 2024. As we get started, let's take a deep breath, connect our feet to the ground, and acknowledge the Indigenous lands that we are on today. I am in Victoria, British Columbia, home of the Lekwungen-speaking people, and Royal Roads University acknowledge that we are on the land of the Lekwungen-speaking people, known as the Songhe and Esquimalt nations and families. So it's with deep gratitude that we learn, love, work, play on those lands, and there's so much we can learn. And yeah, with Indigenous folks, I'm always so grateful for my Indigenous colleagues and friends. And as we talk about justice today, it's so crucial that we make space to learn, unlearn, relearn all together. So thank you. If you know the Indigenous lands that you're joining us from, please add them to the chat and feel free to use the chat throughout the session to introduce yourself. Our goal today, we'll discuss, of course, justice. We'll do a Mentimeter to know kind of your definition of justice. We'll hear from 5 panelists with so much experience and wisdom and guidance. We'll answer any question you might have, and we'll try to save time for networking. And I'll make sure to share the panelists' contact info so you can work with them or connect with them at least if you have any internship, field practice, or any job that you're looking at and you want some advice, right? And why are we here today? We're here because of the Career Innovation Project, and I should say thanks to the Career Innovation Project. So this is federal funding we got for 2 years. So the project is until March 2025, and it's really about creating a campus-wide ecosystem of work-integrated learning initiative, opportunities and networks that equip our students with career skills that support Canada's transition to a net zero economy. And as you'll hear today, we know that climate change, climate justice, so many types of justice are all interconnected. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation. If you have any question or if you want to send a thank you note to our panelists, please use careerservices@royalroads.ca. That's really your main address to reach out to the Career Learning and Development team. And here, if you want to be part of Career Roads, I highly encourage any students or graduates from Royal Roads to scan this code, register in Career Roads, and then you can get access to job posting, events posting, and a bunch of resources. And now let's turn it over to our panelists and to our mentee. Menti.com is coming. The question I have for you here: what does justice mean to you? And I know we have folks working in justice already, so many. Justice is so broad, and this is why I'm so pleased to have that event today, is to hear about all different types or forms of justice. And some folks in the room, you are already studying justice studies, so you will know about justice, but please just give it a try. You can add as many words as you'd like. What does justice mean to you? And of course, the panelists, you can play as well and add a few words there. And I'll give ourselves a few minutes to be there. And that will kind of lead the conversation, right, for today. Freedom, equality, respect. I love Menti. I just love how dynamic it gets. And if our words get more, kind of enter more than once, this is why those words will become a bit bigger here. Equity and humility, big one, totally. Reciprocity, reciprocal relationship, fairness for all. Make right from wrongs, wow, yeah, acknowledging injustice for sure. And I love that we're doing it today together as well, because many students were reaching out before the session about not knowing really what justice means, or, sometimes we feel a little bit lost. And this is why I think we have such a variety of panelists today that we can all learn with and from. So please don't be shy. If you're unsure, you can still go ahead. And yeah, I think we're really here to learn from each other. Balance, restoration, voice, right? Human rights, yeah. Thank you. We're at 33 responses. That's amazing. Wonderful. So I'll just stop sharing for a minute, but I think you can still add to it if you'd like, and I'll make sure to share it with everyone with the recording after the session. Okay, and here we go. I will introduce our panelists here. So we have Janelle Lapointe. You can wave here. Janelle works with the David Suzuki Foundation and is a key member of the UBC Climate Justice Hub. Janelle is a young Afro-Indigenous person who grew up in Stelaqua, a Dakwel, I hope you will correct me in a few minutes, a Dakwel community in the northern interiors of so-called British Columbia. Additionally, she organized with Common Horizon, is a regular contributor on CBC Vancouver, the early edition climate panel. She's a member of the Indigenous Climate Adaptation Working Group and a council member of 7 Gen Energy. Thank you, Janelle. I'll pass it over to you in a few minutes. I think I'll just introduce everyone and then we'll hear from everybody. We also have Lilly Woodbury, hi, from Surfrider Canada. Lilly is involved in climate and environmental justice for several years. Under the umbrella of the environmental movement, her main love is environmental communication with a focus on hosting environmental media from conferences, television, film festival, and other events. Lilly has been with the Surfrider Foundation for years, and you have worked on various projects in Tofino and Victoria. And we also have Heidi Fricker. Hi, Heidi, with the Department of National Defense. And Heidi is one of our students as well at Railroad. With a focus on criminal justice, Heidi started her career supporting neurodiverse adolescents navigating the justice system, as well as society and the school system. Currently serving as a senior restorative practitioner in a program with the Department of National Defense, Heidi is committed to fostering healing and accountability. Outside of work, she resides in an intentional co-housing organic eco-village in Yarrow, BC. And I can't wait to hear more from that, Heidi. And we have Brad. Welcome back, Brad. Thank you for being with us. Brad worked for the Salvation Army, for over 9 years, you mentioned, and recently transitioned to the BC Public Service world. And Brad, I didn't know that, but you're also a Railroad graduate with a BA in Justice Studies. I found that on your LinkedIn. Thank you for being with us, Brad. And finally, but not the least, Robin Whyte, I should say. We just chatted about it. You are the founder of Girl About Town. You promote accessibility as a key element in justice work. Robin aims to be part of showcasing your city, lovely Victoria, sharing tips she has learned along the way for people living with disabilities. We met Robin at a past event in September and love the story and impact she makes in her daily life. So enough of me, and I will pass it over to Janelle to explain maybe who you are, what your career looks like, and what's the organization, I should put an S there, that you work with. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Hadi Bundada Hunzu, hello, good morning. Janelle Lapointe, Stutney, Stellatan Incas, Luxilio Asli, Alu and Michelle Lapointe, Abba and Renee Lapointe, Atsu and Emma Baker, Atienne and Willie Baker, Masquin, Squamish, Slavatuth, Hubu, Yanka, Etspa, Ninja Nasya, Nuru, Peyote, Hubu, Yanka, Etspa, Ninja Nasya. Hello, everyone. My name is Janelle. I am from Stellatan First Nation. I am Caribou Clan and was just introducing myself in my own language, acknowledging that I'm usually living and working as an uninvited guest on the beautiful unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories. But today I'm calling in from the territories of the Nuwu and Southern Peyote people in Las Vegas, Nevada. And then as part of protocol, I acknowledge my parents, including my matrilineal grandparents, my late grandfather, Willie Baker, who was African American and Choctaw, and my grandmother, Emma Baker, who is a Dacath elder, language teacher, matriarch, badass, honestly. Really important that I bring them into to this work every time I speak. And yeah, I wear a lot of hats, as you heard in my introduction. My main gig is at the David Suzuki Foundation, where I work as a senior advisor on our Indigenous strategic approach. But I have a foot in climate adaptation, mitigation, clean energy, et cetera, and love to speak about kind of the big picture interconnectedness of all these issues. I love storytelling. It's the way that I was brought into this work. So thought I would begin by just telling you a little bit more about myself. I always say to know me is to know where I come from. So yeah, I just wanted to start by talking about my homelands. I was very fortunate to grow up on the traditional territory of my grandmother, Emma. Right where she was born, right on the Stelaco River, is where our community is now. And I think my territory is one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's abundant with fresh water. It has so much wildlife and a rich culture and connection to that place. But you know, growing up there, I was also faced with some stark realities. When I look outside of my window, I can see Highway 16, known as the Highway of Tears, which is of course, a somber reminder about the disproportionate violence against women and girls that take place in that region. And despite living amongst this natural abundance of fresh water, I grew up without clean drinking water, and even water that was poisoned by arsenic because of the local mine runoff. And all of these things were kind of in stark contrast to the settler municipality that is a 5-minute drive down the road that had access to clean water, and didn't experience the same level of violence we have. My community has been overlogged, overmined, and now the fossil fuel industry, of course, is next in line to get the resources. So I feel like I've grown up, you know, kind of with this hope and grief simultaneously. I was definitely like a very quiet, curious kid. So I love to just like be out in the forest, be out on the river. I remember presenting in front of my second grade class and telling everyone that my favorite animal was a salmon, which, you know, is not a common favorite animal for a lot of 9-year-olds. But yeah, I think through that curiosity is really how I got to learn about yeah, both the natural world around me and of course the impacts of colonialism and capitalism on my territory. And yeah, I kind of observed this, but didn't have the language or the experience to really share my story or to connect it to these systems. And I was just going to, you know, move away from home and go to school and go on a typical career path. I really wanted to be a conference planner. I studied event management and was planning large scale conferences and really just kind of head down, being really involved in my local university community at the Thompson Rivers University on unceded Secwepemc and Tecumseh territory. And I had this kind of profound experience in my third year. I was really, really homesick in a way that I didn't expect. And I think I'd kind of taken for granted that, you know, connection to land through my grandmother. And I was really, really homesick. And I attended this university gala, and the elder doing the land acknowledgement reminded me so much of my grandmother. She was actually from a territory very close to me, and she was very similar in stature, and even the way she spoke with her hands and her cadence was just like so much like my grandma. And she gave this really beautiful, thorough land acknowledgement. She had us close our eyes, and she was acknowledging, you know, all of the animals from the birds in the sky to the creepy crawlies on the ground. And then she started to talk about, you know, connection to the land and what it means to be uninvited guests on these territories. And I was really kind of like immersed in this land acknowledgement. And when I opened my eyes, I was still kind of stuck in the moment And people around me were starting to stand up, and they weren't applauding her, they were applauding her being kind of quickly moved off stage to make way for this $500,000 donation from the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And I knew that the TMX pipeline was really contentious, especially amongst Indigenous people in Secwepemc, and of course on Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories. And I was really confused on why the university was accepting such a large donation, and really struck by like the contrast and hypocrisy between the land acknowledgement and that. And I thought that was just like kind of the perfect like image. I was literally seeing an Indigenous elder being removed to make way from this monetary donation. And that to me like painted a really clear picture about, you know, the kind of story of these lands in so-called Canada. And so from there, I started getting involved with the grassroots movement against Trans Mountain Pipeline, which then propelled me to learn about the many different fights happening in the territory. And I think through that process, was starting to meet people and hear experiences and languages that was able to, you know, give me the words to speak about my own experience. So that eventually landed me a job at the David Suzuki Foundation, where I've been for the past 5 years. And I think core to my work is just all about land and all about home. And, you know, the mainstream environmental movement, you know, the concept of land and nature is often really separate from people. It's this entity that we want to remain pristine and untouched from people. But that's really antithetical to Indigenous worldviews, where, you know, we consider ourselves part of the land and these natural elements as our own relatives, members of our community, and you know, really vital to our critical role. And so those kind of those roots, those conservationist roots of the environmental movement haven't been completely acknowledged or really thought through. You know, the environmental movement is still you know, dominated by a lot of white folks that have a lot of class privilege, and Indigenous people are really only forefronted when there's things to fight against. And so a lot of my work the past few years has been thinking about what we're fighting for. And so that's why I've kind of added these different buckets of work to my work, really learning about climate solutions and what they might look like in my community. And well, one narrative I'm really focused on confronting right now is there's been this mainstream buzzword on economic reconciliation, which is kind of Indigenous nations' rights to partner on these major economic development projects. And in an economy where, you know, we mostly forefront these extractive industries, that means that under the guise of reconciliation, Indigenous people are being offered the partnership of, namely in British Columbia, LNG, natural gas projects, which of course have detrimental impacts to our land and waterways, and will completely diminish our province's climate targets. And so I've been really thinking about like old economies that we had, the ways, you know, we would trade, the way our governance systems were. You know, you were considered a good leader in my culture if you had a wealth of land and you were able to provide the people and you were actually able to give to other clans. And so I'm thinking about those economic models, which I think are really affirmed by a lot of the work that is happening with circular economy work. And then I'm also thinking about the ways we need to innovate. Like, of course, there's an energy need. We're in a new modern context. So I'm thinking about ways we bring those models into a contemporary context, and also, you know, have Indigenous partnerships and ownership of clean energy projects in this new management systems and energy systems that we need to address the concept. So yeah, justice to me is thinking about all those elements. And I think something that's been really lacking in the mainstream is, you know, linking the climate crisis to the affordability crisis, to racial injustice. Like, to me, threading those big problems together, you know, on the surface, it may seem that it's overwhelming, but being able to draw those lines has actually been like really grounding for me, and I think builds a bigger sense of a movement, a bigger sense of what we're fighting for. And I think that's going to be really critical to winning climate justice. So I guess my main message to folks is to just really, you know, think about your own story, your own context, think about, you know, what you're personally struggling with and what your community is struggling with. And guaranteed, if you're able to kind of go beneath the iceberg, you'll see that we have a similar root cause. And then I think once we identify those root causes, we can really see our stake in fighting collectively against it. And I think that's what justice is. It's all of us fighting for equity, even if we're working in separate issue spaces. So yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to hearing questions. So let's say that's it.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, such a great invitation for all of us to reflect, and if our students have research project or things to work on, right, to keep that in mind. And yeah, I've been following a little bit the COP16 in Colombia, and I was so pleased to hear I mean, there's always more we can do for sure, but I was pleased to hear from Indigenous folks over there, kind of the rights and the movement and I don't know, they were saying that there's quite a lot of energy going on right now. So hopefully it comes to Canada too and everywhere, right? Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. And I think I'll pass it to Lilly if you want to introduce us to Surfrider and the work you do there.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nancy. And thanks, Janelle, for opening us up. I wasn't ready to stop listening to you. You're such a great storyteller. I was not ready to go next. So anyways, hey everyone, my name is Lilly Woodbury. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a white settler. My family is from England. And I'm grateful to be joining you from the unceded and traditional territory of Tloquet First Nation in Nutchucks, which a lot of folks know as Tofino on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And as mentioned, I'm here on behalf of Surfrider Foundation Canada. And if you're unfamiliar with us, our mission is the protection and enjoyment of the ocean, beaches, and waves for all people. And that's enacted by a volunteer activist network. And we work on clean water, coastal preservation, ocean protection, beach access, and plastic pollution. And we've been doing work for 40 years. It was started in the United States, but now we have Surfrider all around the world, here in Canada, Europe, Senegal, Argentina, Australia, Japan. And so it's a really incredible growing movement. And what I really love about the organization is that we drive our mission through direct action campaigns. And so through our campaigns, we're always working to address the roots of issues and be able to achieve upstream policy and regulatory change. And of course, environmental justice is so integral to the campaigns that are going to benefit both people and the planet. So often, if campaigns are designed without considering the needs of people, especially those facing marginalization, facing harm from extractive industries, these changes in campaigns can actually inadvertently cause harm. And on that point, speaking about environmental justice, I need to rewind to acknowledge the broader context and note that the Western conservation movement really has been rooted in colonialism and has created harm. So for instance, the Pacific Rim National Park Reserve, which is just right across from where I live, it's super nearby, like 10 minutes down the road from where I am. And again, this is numerous New Channel First Nations, unceded and traditional territory. And when this park was established, this displaced numerous New Channel First Nation communities. And this is a case across British Columbia. Strathcona Park is similar, again, across Canada and around the world. And Western environmental nonprofit organizations have been part of this issue as well. Again, inadvertently causing harm by not working directly with impacted people, including Indigenous peoples, speaking on behalf of communities, making decisions without communities, again, including sovereign Indigenous nations. So ENGOs definitely have a legacy that needs to be repaired. I think a lot of ENGOs have come a super long way. There's so many ENGOs who are doing such fabulous work, David Suzuki Foundation being one of them. I always look at the work they're doing because it's freaking incredible. But yeah, this is an ongoing process. It's not a destination, it's a journey. So now looking at environmental justice and Surfrider's mission, the extractive paradigm that degrades and pollutes the ocean, beaches, and waves, again, is also rooted in colonialism and also depends on other systems of oppression to operate. So again, to safeguard healthy and clean aquatic systems for all people, we have to address these inequitable power structures. So this is, again, super essential for addressing environmental justice and achieving climate justice. And I imagine a lot of folks know these definitions, but just so everyone's on the same page, environmental justice is a movement ensuring that all communities, all people, especially marginalized communities and communities who've been historically and are currently impacted by extractive industries, have equitable access to healthy and safe environments. Environmental justice addresses the ways in which environmental hazards such as pollution, toxic waste, resource extraction, and the climate crisis disproportionately impact Black, Indigenous, people of color-based communities and low-income communities. And the core of environmental justice is the belief that everyone has a right to a healthy environment, which is a human right acknowledged by the United Nations and enshrined in the United Nations. Another important and interconnecting term to share is climate justice. Obviously, the climate crisis impacts almost everyone, but not everyone in the same way. Again, people who are facing degrees of marginalization are impacted the most. The people who have contributed the least to the climate crisis are the ones who are impacted the most. Ironically, also, some of the people doing the most work to end the climate crisis and stop the climate crisis are the ones who've also done the least. Again, we see this across Turtle Island with Indigenous land defenders who have done the most to keep oil in the ground. And so with climate justice, it's absolutely essential that these voices are centered in climate-related policies, legislation, and all other actions. And I think with climate justice, it's important, I guess the way I see it, that's important to share, is that it really is like this umbrella. And environmental justice, racial justice, Indigenous justice and resurgence, health justice, labor justice, economic justice, and social justice all funnel into climate justice. We can't achieve climate justice without realizing those other forms. And so to build on Janelle's point, we all pull at these different threads and together we work to achieve climate justice together. So now giving more of a specific example with the work we do at Surfrider. We work on all kinds of things. A lot of the files I work on are on plastic pollution, and I feel like the link with environmental justice and climate justice in the plastic movement hasn't always been made clear. I think with the cultural zeitgeist of the world, most people, or a lot of people, started thinking about plastic pollution in relation to the impact on coastal and marine environments. People can think about the images of whales with plastic bags, this turtle with the straw in its nose, and this is important. It's also not the full picture. There is injustices caused throughout the full life cycle of plastics. It's not just an end of life problem. There's environmental injustices associated with fossil fuel extraction and transport, plastic refining and manufacture, plastic consumption as well. Plastics contain 4,200 unregulated chemicals. And again, the cheapest food is in plastic. Communities that don't have fresh drinking water are drinking from plastic, which again, also consuming microplastics, plus all these unregulated chemicals. And of course, the plastic end-of-life management and ongoing impact once it reaches the environment. Again, there's loads of frontline and fence line communities next to landfills and plastic incinerators who are impacted by that end-of-life management, which really is not management at all. It's mismanagement. And so, yeah. This is all super important to recognize. Plastic production is also the fossil fuel industry plan B as we continue to decarbonize energy systems. Plastics industry, they want to ramp up plastic production. They want to triple production by 2050. We've already completely overreached the planet's capacity and human capacity to deal with this problem. So again, being able to address this from the justice lens is absolutely imperative for going forward, ending the plastics crisis. Giving an example of Surfrider's campaign, we right now are working on our foam-free waters campaign. And so with that one, 80% of aquatic infrastructure in British Columbia is on expanded polystyrene. A lot of folks may recognize this as you see like the foam trays in grocery stores for meat and fish, or in electronics packaging. It's that white fluffy foam that breaks apart very easily. A lot of our docks, rafts, are built on this expanded polystyrene, in part because it's super cheap to manufacture, which is a whole other story of the problems with the plastics industry and how they're subsidized. This material makes up half to 3/4 of what we collect on shorelines. And this material is also extremely chemical laden. And so a year and a half ago, we started working on this campaign, Foam Free Waters, to get a federal ban on expanded and extruded polystyrene in aquatic infrastructure. So getting this out of the waters. And the reason we started working on it is we had a conversation with Toloquiet First Nation, the tribal park staff, asking about, what forms of marine pollution prevention did they want us to work on? And they shared that they wanted to work on getting polystyrene out of the waters, and definitely checked out with our beach clean data. And so we started working together to retrofit docks, getting rid of the polystyrene, and working on implementing sustainable alternatives with air-filled floats. And so I'll drop a link in the chat so people can sign the petition for this as well and send a letter to their MP and the Federal Minister of Environment. And again, just to make the life cycle point of this again, polystyrene, the chemical base of this is benzene, and there was an environmental disaster in Canada this year with benzene in Aamjiwnaang First Nation in Sarnia, Ontario, known as, there's an area right outside the nation called Chemical Valley. And they produce benzene, which then goes into polystyrene, and there was a benzene spill, and the community had to be evacuated. So again, there's injustices to do with plastic production and supply throughout the life cycle. And I will put this into the chat. This month is also very exciting in the world of plastic advocacy. There's the 5th round of negotiations for a global plastics treaty taking place in South Korea, which we'll be attending. And a lot of our key asks alongside other ENGOs, again, I know folks from David Suzuki Foundation will also be there, is centering human rights and Indigenous rights and human health in the global plastics treaty, and also capping plastic production by 75%, because really we have to drastically lower the amount of plastics being produced to achieve climate and environmental justice, and again, to protect rights and human health. And so to close, we're a volunteer-based organization, and our mission is carried out by volunteers in communities and volunteers at schools. And we support these volunteers with training, supporting them to level up their skills as coastal activists. And pretty much everyone who's a staff in the organization, including myself, started out as a volunteer. And so if anyone here on the call is interested in getting involved, let me know. And yeah, thanks so much, Nancy, for organizing.
Thank you so much, Lily. I was hoping, you touched on so many interesting points. Thank you so much. And I was hoping you will bring up the fact that you started as a volunteer. And I think for the folks in Victoria, I see that we have a beach cleanup coming up this Sunday. But I love that you mentioned it's way more than beach cleanup. I think often we think of Surfrider as, we go in community and we clean and then we talk about it, we collect data. But I love all the other, fight that you're running. That's amazing. So if students have questions, we'll use the chat. And now we'll pivot a little bit to Heidi, I guess, with another, I don't know if we can say type of justice. It's all related. Restorative justice we talked about. And let us know a little bit about your career path, please, and your organization.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I am currently doing a restorative engagement process with the Department of National Defense and the Canadian Armed Forces. And a project of this size has never been, a restorative project has never been done at this size in an institution or an organization, because I really do want to highlight that the absolutely massive restorative process that was undertaken in Rwanda post-genocide in the Gacaca courts, this process pales in comparison to that one. But just to really focus on that, this has been implemented in a bureaucratic organization, just to make sure that I'm honoring the work that's been done in so many other places. So I'll tell you a bit about how I got here, and I'll tell you a little bit about the work, and then I want to expand a little bit more about where restorative justice or conflict transformation or transformational justice is being implemented, with a focus right now just in British Columbia. But so I started out, I was kind of late to the game to do an undergrad, and when I finished, I started volunteering for my local community restorative justice association, quite curious about what was possible. These are located in most every community. This is where I'll start, as advocating for volunteers for any type of restorative work. Most of the time, these organizations are working for youth and adult first offense diversion. And they take on a few other files that could be community related. And so after I'd been in there for a while, and this was when I was also working in the school system with criminally inclined adolescents, I started to kind of get curious about what was possible with restorative justice, and a posting came up for the Restorative Opportunities Program in our federal corrections. And quite frankly, I wasn't sure that restorative processes were possible with family survivors of homicide and victims of violent crime. And I had the absolute luck of landing the position and having the opportunity to do that for 3 years. And when family survivors of homicide and victims of violent crime have the opportunity to have their own voice and speak to the perpetrators of the violence that occurred to them or family members or friends, it is an incredible process, because it has taken away the what is the word? Just give me a second here. The punitive aspect of justice. And it's put it back in the hands of the folks that have lost their voice, lost choice, lost their power in the process. And it hands it over to them and gives them the opportunity to have a direct conversation with the offenders. This is a fully voluntary process, and it turned my thinking on its head as to what was possible when two people have the opportunity to be in the same room together in a facilitated dialogue. And so I just want to highlight, this is not a mediated process, because mediation is advocating for both parties in an equitable process. And this is fully acknowledging that there has been an unbelievable power imbalance that has occurred, and generally perpetrated by violence, and then is addressing it and is shifting the power back to those that have lost it. Then this program, the Restorative Engagement Program, began in the military. And so this is a consequence of an enormous class action suit of 25,000 members in the Canadian Armed Forces. It is to do with gender discrimination and sexual misconduct within the military. It was given a time frame of occurrences from the early 80s to 2019. And occurrences that happen within then, people could file for class action within that, but they could also check the box to have a restorative process. So the original 8 class members requested that there be some type of restorative action that gave class members the opportunity to have conversations with representatives of the Canadian Armed Forces. So just to be clear, these are not the actual perpetrators of the violence, but those that are going to represent the institution. And they have 2 responsibilities. One, to be present for the class members, and that could be for them to tell their experiences, the impacts of those experiences, or the insights from those experiences. And they're also, their secondary or second stream, their responsibility is to create a critical mass with how many there are, and to perpetuate or push for culture change within the CAF. So my role is to work with the class members to prepare them. And there were 7,000 of the 25,000 that checked the box wanting a restorative process. And my job is also to work with defense representatives, and they go through a educational process to not only enlighten them as to the depths of the issues within the CAF and the D&D, but also to prepare them to meet with class members, and then to equip them to carry these learnings forward into their different elements, their different departments, and their different teams within the organizations to continue to push for culture change. And I think that was incredible intuition or forward future thinking for these class members to say, you know, money is just not enough, that in order for change to happen, change has to happen and infiltrate the whole organization. So right now we are in year 3 and we have a responsibility to wrap this up by at the end of March 2026. I don't know if that's on track to happen. In fact, I don't think it is at all. And once this is completed, there is the Frenette class action suit that has also happened within the military, and that's for racism and discrimination within the military, and that stands to be quite a bit substantially larger than the one that I'm working in right now. And because of the success that we're having with what we're doing, they're going to also be having a restorative process that continues with the next class action suit. Additionally, they've on advice and recommendation of the class members. Within the Department of National Defense, there is a team called the SMSRC, the Sexual Misconduct Support and Resource Center, and they have built a restorative justice department within there. So this will be ongoing within our Canadian military. So there's a few things that I would really like to underscore here. There's a lot of our organizations, federal organizations, provincial organizations, that are not getting things right. And it's really easy to point those things out. And so this is a slow process. There is a lot of people pushing against it within the organization, particularly the Old Boys Club. But there's a lot of people that are advocating for huge change, and change is happening. And so I think it should be a point of pride that the Canadian military, even though it's a class action based, is stepping up. And they're not just saying when this is finished that we end this, that they're saying there's value to the restorative process to continue it on. So where else is restorative justice or transformation justice being used? And I would have to say, where isn't it being used? So it's everywhere from our schools. It's being developed in our communities. Vancouver is called a restorative city, and that is largely in part to many Indigenous organizations within our province that have said there is a better way of doing conflict, there is a better way of running our organizations, and there's a better way of doing things. And so using peace circles, it has been implemented. What we're seeing is now from the top down, where the province of British Columbia is advocating very heavily that how many of our organizations are managed is through peaceful processes rather than adversarial processes. We have a long ways to go, but we're getting there. Additionally, Simon Fraser University has a whole restorative department. And so what we're noting is just within the last 5 years, the amount of academic research about restorative justice processes is growing. And so what we're seeing is a lot of theory that's coming out of it, that the process is based in theory and it's not just grassroots kumbaya, where people just kind of dismiss it really quickly, that it's just kind of a feel-good thing and in passing. And so what we're noting is that in our prison systems, that folks are much less likely to reoffend, that those rates come down by half. I think it's 35% that you have, Brad, help me out here. I can't think when you reoffend, it's called, I'm drawing a blank.
Recidivism.
Recidivism, thank you. I just couldn't think of it right now. Thanks so much. Recidivism rates drop down below 13% when restorative processes are implemented. And so what we're what we're seeing within the province of British Columbia, just as a focus, is that we have community-based programs that are working with youth. We have schools-based programs that are educating kids on peace processes, peace circles, restorative processes, where there's certificate programs for kids so that they're gaining the skills, so that they're student leaders and they're carrying that forward. We're seeing it in community engagement programs. And so there are organizations that are now specializing in facilitating these community engagement restorative processes when there's conflict. And so I could give you an example. In the city of Abbotsford, there is a very large homeless population. And so there was conflict with the Downtown Business Association, the neighbors that lived in the area, and then the folks that were living nearby but outdoors. And so they used a restorative process to bring the groups together to have conversations as to how do we get through this, rather than just having one voice make a decision and this didn't meet the needs of everyone. And so this is employing a whole community to build relationships within the community to come to an understanding of what is the best process and the best way forward. So in addition to that, you see restorative processes used for vandalism, theft, community and family conflict. It is used for sexual violence, family survivors of homicide, which I've referenced, corporate issues, environmental conflict, racism, discrimination. And what we're finding that not only through the work that people are doing, but the academic process from universities such as Simon Fraser University, which is the preeminent one here in British Columbia, but also organizations such as Just Outcomes, which are heavily advocating for academic rigor in the processes so that people have trust in a process rather than just having hope that something's going to work differently, instead of having a retributive process, that we can have a relational process. So what is justice? The question was vision for justice. So what is our vision for justice if it isn't punitive? So justice is having a voice, speaking truth, hearing someone tell the truth and take ownership. For some, hearing an apology, having dignity and connection. So where are opportunities with this work? Well, I would have to say, particularly in the province of BC, it's everywhere. It's everywhere from small communities, our schools, to now in our province and in our federal corrections and our provincial corrections. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Heidi. That's good food for thought. And I can only imagine our justice student being like, I want to learn more. I want to go on that path. And I think you're a beautiful example too, Heidi, if I may add to the fact that you saw the event and you got curious about it and you connected with me. So like that's a good practice for all students, right? When you feel that you have an expertise or you want to talk about something, just reach out to the people building the event, and then we kind of go from there. So I'm glad you did it, because that's so interesting, the work you do. Thank you so much. And I'll pass it over to Brad with a similar experience, maybe with community services, but different at the same time. So thank you, Brad.
Yeah,
and thank you, Heidi.
Yeah, so is my audio coming through okay? Does it sound
Yeah.
fine? Perfect. So thanks for inviting me here again. So yeah, I have 11 years experience in community corrections. 10 of those years of experience are in federal community corrections, working at the Salvation Army CRF halfway house that they had there. And the last year has been with provincial and BC Public Service as a probation officer. So in terms of federal, when I would talk about parole and probation would be pre and post disposition clients. So with parole, just to elaborate a little bit on that, a lot of people aren't even familiar with, when somebody gets sentenced to a term of federal custody, most of those people are going to come out. They're going to come out at some point. They're going to have eligibility dates, whether it's a UTA date, a day parole date, or mandated by law at 2/3 of the way through a sentence. Somebody will get what's called statutory release. So these things are all kind of guided under the Corrections and Conditional Release Act. So people will come out in the community. So when I say I work with them in the community, they're still under sentenced. So you can kind of view it as almost a jail sentence in the community. Whereas probation, when I say pre-disposition and post-disposition, pre basically just refers to people that have been charged but not convicted. They're awaiting a court date to come. So those people are supervised. Whereas predisposition refers to individuals that have been sentenced. So they've been charged, convicted, sentenced, and maybe they're on a probation order of some form, conditional sentence order, or some form of peace bond. So I'm just going to elaborate a little bit on my journey on where I got here, why community corrections and justice like that. So back when I was about 21, I was actually doing electrical. I was a tradesperson, and it just wasn't for me. At 21 years old, I had the insight of why isn't it for me? I don't know. But I ended up looking at some programs. I saw psychology, sociology, criminal justice, and quite honestly, I just flipped a coin and went with criminal justice. And it was probably one of the best decisions for me. And I was just blown away at all kind of the career prospects. that a criminal justice program could offer. There were opportunities that I saw through probation, parole, police, restorative justice, federal corrections, youth work. So it was really great, a fantastic experience for me. And but I was a little bit taken back in terms of, okay, well, which path do I go down? And my structure at the time told me, well, rent it, don't buy it. In other words, you can try these types of things. You don't have to kind of get involved right away. So I did that, and that was a real helpful piece of advice for me. So I ended up volunteering at Victoria Police Department, the old youth detention center, which is now the New Roads Therapeutic Center on Talcott Road, as well as Victoria Parole Office. So in kind of working in all of these different settings, I liked the police aspect in terms of kind of having a clear policy framework to operate off, engaging with the community members and things of that sort. But I really enjoyed going into the youth custody center and the adult custody center and getting to know the kids every Thursday evenings, and kind of getting their story, getting their background, and then going back the next week and doing the same and getting that kind of deeper dive that I wouldn't maybe get in maybe a law enforcement capacity. So I ended up thinking, okay, like what has both of those kind of combinations? And for me, it was community corrections. And, you know, I've never really looked back, and that's where I've been the last 11 years. So out of my last 10 years in federal roles, 6 of them have been in direct support worker and caseworker roles, working with clients on parole in the community. 4 years have been in management, you know, also working one-on-one with the clients, but also supporting staff in their work with them. And then in the last year, I transitioned to the BC Public Service and began working as a probation officer, because I realized, you know, while managing people's great, I kind of want to return back to my roots and work kind of more alongside of the clients. So I did that, and that's been a great decision for me. So I'd say in the last probably 11 years, I've worked with thousands of different types of clienteles with different backgrounds, different offenses, different demographics. And, you know, it's such a rewarding kind of career to do. And really, truly, no 2 days are the same. And there's always unique challenges and circumstances to address in this line of work. And another real beautiful thing about this line of work is you're not working in a silo. You know, while there is a lot of autonomy in working one-on-one with clients on these different types of releases, you have an integrated case management team with you, right? So you're not making all decisions. There's program staff, psychologists, nonprofits, community partners. It really takes an army to kind of work with this clientele and address whatever their unique needs are. So this job really provided me the opportunity to take both of those things that I really enjoyed from policing and kind of digging deeper on a one-on-one level and kind of mesh them. So I've been able to provide the support, resources, and advocacy on one hand, while also doing the risk management, because that's a real factor as well. Depending on what the individual is, whether it was parole or probation, they'll typically have certain conditions attached to their release order or issued by the PBC, and you have to follow those and make sure that those are enforced accordingly. So you're doing work on an individual level that not only like benefits the client on a one-to-one, but you're also benefiting the community by ensuring that those kind of rules and regulations are enforced. So for me, that was kind of like my why in terms of community correction, those two things and putting them together. But also, I'd like to kind of touch on the why in terms of more of an intangible, because that was the tangible. So the intangible is like the feeling you get from, for example, you know, you're working with the client and the client has for the last 8 years been non-fixed address, homeless, maybe in the streets of downtown Victoria. And the feeling you get through either getting a housing application for them or seeing them and assisting them get housing when they haven't had that for 8 years, the feeling of working with somebody that's, for example, struggled with substance misuse issues for years, and they get into a treatment program, or they decide maybe they're still actively using, but they decide to take a step in the right direction and go, I'm going to taper down, or I would like to seek support for this. just the feeling you get when you see people make those positive changes in their life is a real rewarding thing. And I honestly think that's one of the things that kind of is probably, you know, I love the job. So I'm not sure if the job was built for me or I was built for the job, but with that, I really, it kind of just pulls you instead of you just pushing. So if you really enjoy kind of that type of thing and helping people and assisting people and facilitating change, a lot of the times it doesn't really feel like work. So a lot of my days just don't feel like work. Don't get me wrong, I still get burned out in situations like that. But that's a little bit about kind of my journey and my why for community corrections. Anybody that's interested in this type of work, and you might think, okay, what skill sets do I need? What education do I need? What would make me qualified to work maybe with clients on probation or parole or in any community corrections capacity? From like a soft skill standpoint, it's a lot of the basics, a good perspective, ability to put yourself in other people's shoes and understand different circumstances, integrity, the ability to do the right thing when nobody else is looking, because you do have a lot of autonomy in these types of jobs. If you're going to tell a client you're going to do something, absolutely do that thing, because a lot of your relationships are greater than 1 year with clients. The longest client I had on a caseload was 5 years. So you really get to build rapport. And the only way you make change with these individuals is through developing that rapport. Anybody can read off a condition sheet and say, your conditions are A, B, C, and D. How are you going to address A, B, C, and D? If you just say that to somebody on a first meeting, they're going to go, who the heck are you? I don't care, you know? But if you develop that rapport and facilitate that relationship over time and build that trust, you'll develop a meaningful rapport with that client, and they'll be more inclined to work with you and address whatever those needs, those underlying needs are. So those are some of the skills. A lot of communication, very, very important, written and verbal, and just, you know, having a lot of just common sense, basically. In terms of education, for probation, they just recently took it down. So all you need is a diploma or an associate's degree. And for parole, it is still a bachelor's degree. So it's quite a bit to unpack there. And I know I have a short amount of time, so happy to answer any follow-up questions. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, feel free to reach out for any additional information on either of those through my LinkedIn or my email, and no problem providing any information. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Brad. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was a lot of information, and I'm glad, because I think many of our students sometimes try to navigate the BC public work and system. So maybe, I'm pretty sure you'll hear from us or from some students. Thank you so much. And thank you for everybody who is answering questions in the chat as well. And yeah, Robin, let's go with you. I'm so glad you're joining us, because that was something, as I promoted the event, students were like, but what about accessibility? I want to hear from it. So I'm so glad you're spending time with us and telling us about your business / your experience.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nancy. Being here amongst this incredible group of panelists is very humbling. And so again, thanks again for including me. I think it might be best for me to tell you a little bit about my story, my journey, I suppose. But first of all, I'll just mention that I am coming from the Songhees and the Lekwungen speaking folks, the unceded territory here in Victoria. How to begin? I'll take you on a little bit of my journey. But first, I'll just let you know that I have a disability. I have MS, and I use a little compact scooter to get around. I think that's an important part to tell you about with respect to my my story. I was always a very, very active, athletic person as a young person. I was an accomplished equestrian. I got a basketball scholarship to a university down in Australia, and I did my degree down there, just a general BA kind of thing. And I also was on the rowing team and all that kind of stuff. I was very, very active person. That was a huge part of my identity. And so that was kind of my early 20s. I did a lot of traveling. Then later on in that decade, I got married and had a family. And I was just very dedicated to being a full-time mom. I was diagnosed with MS at the age of 30, which was a huge blow on all kinds of levels. It was just emotionally so difficult. And with respect to my identity, I just was devastated. I kind of thought to myself upon hearing about my diagnosis, which, by the way, took a couple of years to actually happen because, as is the nature of MS, your symptoms kind of come and go. And half the time it seemed like my symptoms would be with me, then they wouldn't. And then I'd be talking to doctors and I'd be perfectly healthy and normal and blah, blah, blah. But I finally got an MRI and I got my official diagnosis when I was 30. So that was devastating because I really didn't know much about what MS was. I knew a tiny bit. I thought that that could be disabling, possibly, and that made me hit the panic button. I kind of thought, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? You know, am I going to end up in a wheelchair? Am I going to die? How is this going to affect my kids? How is this going to affect my husband, my parents, my career? All that kind of jazz. So it was just a really, really difficult time. Plus that decade of my 30s was when, for me, my illness was very, very active. I had a very, very active disease course during my 30s. And, you know, I acquired a lot of disability, including the, you know, the inability to walk. And at first, you know, I would use a walker, but I was embarrassed about using a walker. So I used the walker in my home, and outside of the home, I generally would, you know, ask somebody if I could kind of hold on to their arm, whether that was my husband, obviously, or my mom or my friend, even my older son, you know, that kind of thing. But it was really a difficult time. But fortunately for me, I got to about the age of 40 and my illness just kind of quietened down and stabilized. I was still left with those disabilities that had, you know, I had incurred during my 30s. So it's not like I sort of was reversing, as in, you know, kind of going back and all of a sudden my abilities were restored. No, you know, I had to start using a scooter, which was crazy too, because, you know, it was just so hard for me, you know, emotionally, I suppose, and just in all aspects of my life, because my identity was so physical and so busy and so active. And that was something that I was really proud of. And now to kind of be using a scooter, you know, was really, really hard. And I think for myself, it was really tricky, but I was also worried about it with respect to my kids. I kind of thought, gosh, I don't want them to be, I don't know, embarrassed, perhaps, that their mom has to use a scooter. I mean, most kids wouldn't be embarrassed. They're very sweet. Children are, generally speaking, and they are doing their best to kind of understand what's going on. But, you know, there was just a lot of things that made it very tricky. But I thought to myself, when I kind of got that scooter, right around that time, I really was kind of coming to terms with what was going on with me and accepting my new reality. And I kind of thought, you know, my kids are the ones. I mean, naturally, this is what all children do, is they're patterning off their parents. They're kind of like little sponges. They're soaking up everything that we do and we say, and they're mimicking and they're learning and all that kind of thing. And I thought to myself, you know, the best thing I can do for my kids, I kind of had this moment where I recognized the best thing I can do for my children is to show them through me how to sort of face a very difficult thing that's going on, and yet kind of do it in a way with as much kind of grace as I can, but be positive and still have fun and look on the good side. I mean, not to be Pollyanna in the sense, not to ignore what was going on with me, but also to kind of recognize that, you know, I don't know, we can still have an amazing quality of life. We can still do lots of fun things. It's going to look a little bit different, but let's try to put a positive spin on things. And I really thought that would be the best thing I could do for my kiddos, is just kind of show them through me how to kind of deal with difficult stuff. Sometimes life throws us difficult things, curves, things that we never anticipated that would ever happen. And all of a sudden, boom, we're sitting with this reality. And I really decided that was my opportunity to kind of show them through me, how to really kind of understand how to deal with this the most successfully. And I remember when I had to start using a scooter, I actually had to surrender my driver's license at age 35, which was a massive blow, because having a driver's license, that's something that we all just take for granted, those of us who drive, which is most of us who drive. And all of a sudden, not being able to drive was brutal. And right around that time, I also had to start using a scooter because walking was just too difficult for me outside of the home. So anyway, I thought to myself, when I first got this scooter, my kids were quite fascinated by it. And they knew that it was kind of my legs, essentially, but they really wanted to ride it. They really wanted to use it and check it out and, give it a good old shot. So I thought to myself, I'm just going to let them ride it. So long as they kind of treat it respectfully, I'm going to let them zoom around on it and kind of, I don't know, demystify it and take the stigma away as best I could. So, some people kind of looked at me like I had 3 heads for letting the kids use my scooter. The kids, my boys, I would let them just zoom around on the driveway. I wouldn't let them do jumps. They wanted to take it on jumps, and I kind of had to put my foot down. But I really did let them zoom around on it and ride it like if it was a bit of a rented mule, because I thought they're not going to ruin it. And if they are, we can probably fix it. And my husband was a great kind of repair guy. So I just kind of let them, use it and have fun with it. And their friends kind of learned that, oh yeah, Sam and Boo's mom, yeah, she uses a scooter because she can't walk that well. And my youngest son used to say, yeah, my mom has bad balance, which is one of the symptoms of MS. But yeah, anyway, I just kind of decided that was my thing. And as I say, when I got into my early 40s, things really settled down for me with respect to my illness. And I was really glad. That was a really good thing. But I kind of had a big change up in my life, and now I'm on my own and living by myself in Victoria here. I have always been a person that loves to kind of go out and go to restaurants and enjoy the food scene and go out to the theater and go out to movies and just take part in all kinds of entertainment that's happening in the city. And I thought to myself, just one time my friend and I were out for a lovely brunch at a fabulous restaurant here in Victoria called the Blue Fox Cafe. If you haven't been, I highly recommend it. Anyway, it is sort of accessible. So we were able to get in and enjoy our brunch, and that was fantastic. But, I had to use the washroom, and the bathrooms aren't overly accessible. They're very tight. But this has happened at other places that I have gone, is that I actually, in other places, I can't even get into restrooms. So I had this idea for creating my website called Girl About Town Accessible Victoria. And I highlighted businesses that prioritized accessibility, that would have an accessible washroom, that would have ramps versus stairs, that would have a little bit of space to maneuver once I'm in the business, and that would also have excellent staff that were accommodating and that were understanding, that could sort of help me out a little bit here and there. So yeah, I started to come up with this idea of my Girl About Town website, where, as I say, I highlighted businesses that prioritized accessibility. And I really started to get into kind of understanding a little bit more about accessibility. And through that, I got an opportunity to write the tourism accessibility guides, write and also kind of be featured in the tourism accessibility guides for Tourism Vancouver Island, which have since been rebranded as 4VI. But anyways, it was Tourism Vancouver Island a couple of years ago when I did that. That was an amazing opportunity for me to travel all over the 9 regions of Vancouver Island and check out accommodations, restaurants, parks, all kinds of wonderful things all over the island, and write these tourism accessibility guides from the perspective of somebody using a chair, which was really fantastic. So I did that project. It was so much fun. I really enjoyed it. I really started to get into this whole idea of accessibility and, you know, just understanding it as best I could. So the next thing I did was to take the Rick Hansen Foundation Accessibility Certification Program, which was a very tricky thing because it's really designed for engineers and architects. 2 things which I'm not, but I did have a background in interior design and of course, all my lived experience. So I was able to get into the program and I graduated from that. And it was, again, very, very interesting, learning kind of about the built environment and understanding about kind of how things really had to be. And from that, I started to look around with new eyes and recognize how many places are lacking with respect to accessibility. So anyway, that's just been a really, really interesting journey for me. Really fun doing my Girl About Town website. And I've also recently got a job with an organization called Technology for Living. And I am the Vancouver Island Community Advisor. And what we do is we set up smart home technology for folks with disabilities. So this is really a wonderful area too that I'm also interested in. Anyway, so that's a little bit about me. I'm absolutely open to any questions anybody can think of. Forgive me if I don't get back to questions that are in the chat. It's just that I have a little bit of an issue kind of seeing those questions and also being as kind of available for any other things that are going on. Also, I want to be observant of what's happening on the screen as well. So if anybody sees any questions for me that they want to mention, please let me know. Thank you so much again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Robin. And yeah, and I see that we're already at 12:15. Some people are leaving for other meetings. Thank you everyone so much. But yeah, Robin, I appreciate, and you're sharing so many resources. So I'm looking at your website. I think some of them are there. And if you have extra resources for students, maybe you send them my way and I'll send them with the recording. But I know we were chatting if there's tourism student in the room, just a student who want to help out or collaborate, or you know, as students, sometimes we write paper and we're like, where will that get published or can that help anyone? So I think many of our panelists today can be interested in those. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. And I'll just let you go. I don't see anything. People are just saying a lot of thank you, and people are sharing their information in emails. And I'll make sure to share emails and any jobs, volunteers, opportunities that I find on various websites too. I'll make sure to send them with the recording. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate all of you and have a wonderful day. And if you need to chat with us, you can stay on. I'll leave the room open and stop the recording. Thank you.
Thank you.